Where's our clock at?
Ah, there it is. All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call the Broken Arrow City Council meeting, special meeting for the budget workshop to order. Roll call.
Whippy,
Here.
Gillespie, here. Parks,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Franco.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I can, we've got some new faces here tonight, and I'm really excited because I see so many folks that are helped put this budget together. So could we deviate just briefly? No one has to stand up on the table, but mainly from the back row. We'll start with Matt and just go around. I just want to introduce everybody because I'm really excited to see a lot of folks here tonight. Just reintroduce yourself. How long you been with the city?
Yeah, I'm Andrew, Parks and Recreation Director, and I've been with the city for 4 years.
Ethan Everett, starting engineering construction, been with the city a little over 3 years.
Tim Robbins, Construction Division Manager. I've been here over 8 years now.
Kelly Cox, Human Resources Director. I've been here just over a year.
Charlie Bright, Special Projects Division Manager. I've been here almost 4 years.
Joe Wilford, Chief Building Inspector. I've been here 12 years.
Brandy Parks, Environmental Division Manager. I've been here a little over 3 years. Emily Rowland, Project Engineer. I've been here almost 5 years.
Chuck Oaks, Utilities Director, 4.5 years.
Jerry Schubert, your Solid Waste and Recycling Director, and I've been here for just over 2 years.
Lori Hill, I'm not sure what I am this week. Relations Liaison. I've been with the city 18 years.
Jeremy Moore, Fire Chief, been here a little over 8 years.
Mark Stewart, Assistant Fire Chief, 19.5 years.
Brendan Berryhill, Police Chief, 29 years.
Scott Bennett, Deputy Police Chief, starting my 30th year.
Daniel Hurst, Police Department, 25 years.
Travis Small, Transportation Division Manager, next week will be 5 years.
All right.
Patrick Wilson, Stormwater Division Manager, just over 4 years.
Jennifer Rush, Economic Development Manager, over 2 years.
Tom Cook, Finance Department. This year was my 44th consecutive W-2.
He's so proud of
that. Aaron McCullough, Communications, Media Relations, and 42 years less.
Robin Ty, Budget Officer. I've been here 7 years.
James Talbert, IT Department, 3 years.
Jordan Cuckler, Communications Coordinator. I've been here over a little 3.5 years, I believe.
Mike Godfrey, Producer Director for the city, been here a little bit over 3 years.
Trevor Dennis, City Attorney, 19 years.
Norman Stevens, 4 years.
What?
Assistant City Manager.
Kenny Schwab, Assistant City Manager, and a total of just over 13 years.
Cindy Arnold, Finance Director, just over 5.
Michael Spurgeon, almost 8 years.
Are we already
We already know. You know.
No.
You.
Okay, I was going to say.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Lisa Blackford, I'm the City Clerk's Office, Deputy City Clerk. August will be 42.
Nice.
Brian Bays, Maintenance Service Director, just over 2 years.
Rocky Hinkle, Street Stormwater Director, 5 years at the end of this month.
Scott Carr, Director of IT, just over 3 years.
Yeah. I just want to mention Daniel is also the president of the FOP, and I'm very happy that he's here in that capacity as well, because obviously we discuss a lot and we try to be transparent, so having representation from them is important, so I'm glad to see you here, Daniel. Thanks, Mayor.
All right. So we'll just move on to the item on the agenda, presentation, discussion, and possible direction regarding the revenues, expenditures, and budgets of the City of Broken Arrow.
Thank you, Mayor. In the executive summary, it outlines the process that we use for preparing the budget. And just about everyone, if not everyone in this room, had something to do with putting together this year's spending plan. That's why I wanted to introduce all of them to you and thank them personally for the amount of time and efforts that they helped in their contributions to putting together the proposal that we're going to see. A number of the slides that are early on are similar slides you've seen in previous budget sessions because the thoughts and the process we use are similar. And so I'm going to move a little quicker unless council has questions to get to some of the more proverbial meat and potatoes of actually the presentation this evening. So tonight we're going to hit the highlights for the budget message. There'll be a budget overview. We're going to discuss briefly the general fund, operations overview and update, STCI, the BAM operations and capital, a brief discussion about the Oklahoma Water Resources Board loan program for the utility department. And then, as we talked about last year, the two departments that were selected this year to give a more detailed review of their budget specifically is the Information Technology Department and then General Services, Operations, Fleet, and Building Maintenance. And obviously, if council members have questions about any other department, everyone is here, and if we don't have that answer, then we'll get back to everybody. Lori, in her capacity as Community Relations Liaison or Finance Director, Cindy will actually get that information to you.
Okay.
So that's the lineup for this evening. So moving on, so FY 2024 budget considerations. Just a reminder is that we operate on a July 1 to a June 30th fiscal year, not a January 1st to December 31st calendar year. As we've talked about in the past, the budget really does three things. It serves the following processes or purposes. It's a blueprint for providing municipal services for the upcoming fiscal year. We do our very best to match available resources with the community needs as we understand them from the council and our respective missions in each department. And it outlines the work plan and some of the priorities for the organization. When it comes to putting the budget together, we spend a lot of time talking about maintaining fiscal soundness, which we talked a great deal about this past Tuesday. Also, public safety and preparedness, making sure that we have a comprehensive economic development administration, that we maintain affordable utilities, then also looking at ongoing investments in public infrastructure. And you'll notice this year's budget, the increase is essentially because of the additional projects that we're going to be doing, either in the utility department or through our general obligation bond program. And then overall, it's all focused on one thing, whether it's the departments or it's projects or policies made by council, is everything focused around and trying to maintain the great quality of life that exists within our city. So the book itself includes the city manager's executive summary, which is always, I try to be as comprehensive as possible to give you a snapshot of many of those things we're going to talk about this evening. And as you look through the budget or throughout the year, you can refer back to it for residents who have questions or businesses about the things that are the priorities. Proposed revenues and expenditures for each of our funds, and there are many of them. Proposed department budgets, special funds, street maintenance plan. Several years ago, if you remember, once we started collecting the sales tax specifically for street maintenance, the council said every year they would like for a presentation to be given on how that money is going to be spent every year, tentatively, and Rocky has been here since then, so he's the one that always gives the presentation, and then he essentially comes quarterly and updates how we're doing on the road program that the council approves during the budget process. And then obviously, Kenny talked about the improvements we're going to have to make to our utility system. Also, we talked about the general bond obligation, so there won't be a lot of discussion about the night because we talked about it Tuesday night. And then the manual fees, we discussed that as well. So this next slide, the 4 key budgeting practices is we try to estimate revenues and expenditures conservatively, ensure that all funds balance, include the built-in contingencies for unexpected expenses, and making sure that the fund balances that we have, especially for the general fund, as well as utilities, are consistent with the policy that the council has adopted. And then also making sure that when we make decisions, we're looking at how those decisions impact the city, especially if they're ongoing, so we can make sure sustainability in our finances. So the basis for the budget recommendations really always center around, as I said previously, council's ongoing #1 priority, that's great services to the community. You know, I will say this, is that I do try to get to yes, and I think everyone else has adopted that, but it does create a great deal of challenges for everybody. I mean, a lot of times when you say no, it's real easy. Getting to yes is not always easy, and I'm very proud of the efforts from every organization is the customer service that we give, or trying to find some way to help residents or businesses. And I couldn't be happier with the effort that everyone puts forward, because if you think about it, a great quality of life or great services really starts with everybody in this room, from yourselves all the way down the 1,000 employees, trying to figure out how to help the citizens and businesses. And I would say that we're as good as anybody in terms of trying to make sure we're responsive to our citizens. And whether it's going out and walking a project like I know Kenny did for a lady that's got a problem that's been on the vice mayor for a couple of weeks, rightly so, or going out and dealing with something. I know that Councilwoman Ford yesterday was seeing some of the projects. You see the level of efforts that goes into making sure we provide those great services. Addressed our increasing demands for public infrastructure and public services. Obviously, we're just past the halfway point for our general obligation bond package, which is $141 million that we will be issued at the end of this year potentially, and we're already starting to talk about the next one, because there's always so much that we need to do, and it's exciting to be talking about the next round of general bond obligations that'll have additional road improvements. It'll have upgrades to our facilities, additional public safety improvements, parks and recreation, a community center, possibly a partnership with the school district for an auditorium. All those exciting things that contribute to our quality of life. Okay. So the budget this year, I always like to show this slide, and this is mainly for the public when we do, because as you know, I'll give a condensed version of this on June 5th. This is the breakdown of our sales tax for both Tulsa and Wagner counties, and you can see exactly what our sales tax consists of. Next slide. So this year, the budget as presented to the council is just under $355 million. Last year, we were just under $311 million, which essentially represents a 14% increase over last year. The breakdown, when you look at that total budget, there's really three parts, and we're talking about the total budget now, is operationally is just over $155 million, which is about a 10% over previous year of $141 million. The capital outlay portion, which is all of our projects, is $163 million. And the debt service, which a debt service consists of the general obligation bonds that we issue every year, as well as the debt service that we have for the utility department, plus a couple of others, our TIF notes and so forth, that equals almost $36 million. And I believe, obviously we can't pay, we don't have the kind of revenue to do a pay-as-you-go, and so we always need to be very cognizant of when we're issuing debt, how much debt we're issuing, and making sure that we're meeting the expectations of the community when we're managing that, because we just, no city has the kind of money to be able to do this, to pay-as-you-go capital. So here's the traditional chart about where does the money come from, and that'll be in the packet that city will provide. But this is, once again, is more for the community when they take a look to see, because we get questions. And this also appears in some version in our Thrive edition we put out every year, so folks know where we actually get our funds from.
And this, to see a clearer one, it's on page 63. It's on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Where's the money?
And so where does our money go? And that's the breakdown. The debt service, about $36 million. Personnel, $97 million in personnel. Other services, $45 million. Capital outlay.
And this is not considered taking into effect the transfers.
Okay. Next slide. So our general fund this year is $138 million, actually almost $139 million. Last year it was $121 million, so it's just an increase of about 10% over the previous year. The general fund assumptions includes there is a cost of living increase for the non-union employees, and we are currently in negotiations with both of our bargaining units, and those hopefully will be wrapped up sometime. Normally it's usually in the summer, and then we implement those by way of ordinance. We present those to council. Sales tax projection is at 2.5%. Other revenues are 1.5%. Health insurance for employees was up. Life Ride, obviously we talked about that, and there's some additional discussions that need to be had about Life Ride. And then workers' compensation transfer increase by actuarial study.
We are actually self-insured, so we take, the actuary does a projection of how much we're gonna need, and we take half of it from general fund and half of it from BAMA, and it went up about 50,000 on each side.
And the health insurance for employees, that's out of our pocket. We're not charging our employees that 3%.
We don't know exactly what the rates are going to be yet. It's too early, because our plan's January 1. So this is in anticipation just in case it's like a worst case scenario. But we don't know at this point what, depending on our claims and stuff. It's still early in the year. This is normal. We usually do add something for the health insurance, and that would be our portion of it. And whether or not some of it goes to the employees, that still has to be decided.
Usually the Employee Health Benefits Committee working with HR, they'll look at our claims in the fall, about the same time as we're actually re-enrolling for the benefits, and they'll have a recommendation if there's any need for us, if the city can absorb what's the claims we received and what's projected, or there's a need to make an adjustment.
As an employee, you don't want to get a 3% raise and then have to turn around and pay 3% more for your health insurance. So that's, hope we can work that out.
And that is really looked closely at the fall, because there's been years that we did really well in our health care plan, so we did not charge employees, for the month of December.
Yeah.
Next slide. Top current revenue sources: sales tax is 71%, franchise fees, O&G, and PSO primarily. I met with O&G folks today, as a matter of fact, had a big meeting with their team and the engineering, along with Kenny Schwab. I'll have an update for you next week. It was a very, very positive and productive meeting with them. So, charges for services, other miscellaneous revenues. That's what makes up the revenue that we forecast for balancing our budget. In the general fund, total revenues for 2024, not including the transfers, and Cindy can address that if we need to, $87 million. So revenues are 11% over last year. Expenditures, personnel services, other services, and charge of materials is $28 million or $29 million. And the FY 2027 expenses, is that?
Up 11.6, yeah.
Oh, 24.
I changed that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I didn't know that.
She's really predicting.
Way ahead.
I swear I made that change. Probably didn't say it. And these is just the general fund revenue sources, which is in the book too.
Next slide.
And these are expenses by classification. As you can see on the general fund, personal services is about 70%. And it's by department. And that's all in the summaries.
Okay. So every year I get requests for additional positions, and we look at those very closely. We take a look at how much revenue we believe that we're going to have to be able to spend in an ongoing way. And after looking at that, talking to the directors, these are the positions that I'm asking council to consider that we add to the budget. So the first one is in HR, and then there are two in the parks, a maintenance worker, an irrigation technician. We need additional code enforcement officer in community development, a grant coordinator that would be located in finance, also an accountant in finance, an animal control officer for police, records clerk for the police. I plan to continue the practice in trying to anticipate the number of retirees we have every year, over hiring to try to stay at our authorized strength. We have 157 police officers, and I think we're over by 1 or 2 right now. But we don't always, officers and firefighters don't come to us at the beginning of every fiscal year and say, some do, but not everyone comes and says, we're going to retire throughout the year. Usually it happens, we get some notice, but not a lot. But what I'm looking at is probably overhiring by 6 for the fire department and probably 4 to 6 for the police department, whatever the chief feels is necessary to make sure we stay at 157. It's been a while since we've actually been at at 157 or 158. So I'd like to continue to overhire there. Then we get the study back, and then we can take a look at what the study recommends. Also in the fire department, I mean, obviously you have a couple of positions, the deputy fire marshal, EMS training officer. There's obviously our majority of our calls are EMS related, so therefore additional training officers needed. And one thing that we don't have, we have one in the police department, not in the fire department. And I've decided this year to look at a public information officer for the fire department.
So with the public information officer for fire, would they also do like prevention talks and those types of things?
Yes.
Thank goodness we don't have that much PIO. I mean, we need them, but I don't see us having a full-time just PIO. So it'd be good to get.
Well, fire prevention, fire safety, they'll be very much rolled into there. There's a lot of communications that would be very helpful. Right now you have the communications team helping, and they'll continue to help just like they do with the police. But I just think with all that's going on, there's more opportunities to promote what we do, how we do it, and mainly just the proactiveness and public education.
Absolutely. I'm surprised we've gone this long actually without having a full-time PIO in fire.
This council member, and I've got directors here that can speak to directly. Those are the positions that are being considered. Obviously, the grant coordinators, I think it's going to, at some point, it may take a couple of years, will pay for themselves, because most competitive grants have a portion of the grant that actually the city can keep for administration. But you have to obviously forward fund the position and then start winning these grants. And so I can see that position with what's out there could potentially pay for itself for a good portion of it,
Sure.
probably in a couple of years.
I have a question on that. Is there any potential for, because as a grant coordinator, would there be like a problem since we do have fund balances? Because I know when you apply for a grant, they look at how much money you have available to you. So I feel like potentially that could be an issue, because company or whoever's giving the grant could look at us and be like, well, you have money sitting in a savings account. I just want to make sure that we're not setting our grant coordinator up for failure we need to make sure, because I worked for a nonprofit right out of college, and that was a huge thing because I worked for the Ronald McDonald House, and we had a ton of money. And we had problem, other than local donors, we did have problems getting grants because of that, because we had so much money.
That's a great question. There's a lot of public money, and there's also like quasi-public money out there that we could look for. And I think the number one thing they're going to look at, does the city have a match? Because most of the grants that we would apply for would have like an 80-20, where they pay 80, we pay 20, could be 50-50, it could be 25-75. The good thing about our organization is we have, if it's a grant that, for example, if it's a transportation grant, we could easily say we have our 25% or our 50%. Okay, we could be penalized because of our ability to pay. In other words, they may look at us.
We're looking at that with the senior center right now, because if we look at taking them over as a city, is it going to set us up not to be able to get grants for the senior center? So
we're going to be discussing that at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with our first meeting with the senior advisory group that's been put together by the board, as you know, to begin those discussions, because that's my number one concern, is if it's determined that we would lose any of our private funding as a result of this, then maybe we can still accomplish the same thing. We just may have to look at how we enhance our model. Okay. So that's one of the first things we have to look at. I'm more concerned, but your concern is legitimate, because they look at Broken Arrow, and we have some level of financial wealth. Would we not get something? That's a possibility, but I'm more making sure, because there's not very many grants out there that say it's going to be 100%. Right. So when we go after something, the grant coordinator is going to have to look and work with the directors, and the police does this all the time. Sometimes you match with personnel and the services you provide, or it has to be a hard dollar match. And so, but we wouldn't be applying for anything, and most of those grants require the council to approve them anyway. Okay. So it's a good question. Okay. But those are the positions. Does anybody have a question about those? I mean, obviously, every year I've tried to add a few positions, and I mentioned in my budget message, we're just under, between full, part-time, and the temporary, just under 1,000. And we were around 800 or so when I first got here 8 years ago. So I've just tried to incrementally increase the number of people to match our revenue.
So, like in our engineering department and stuff, we're fine there because we're growing so much, and they've got so many projects going on all the time. We have enough engineers to cover all of our projects that we have going on, I guess.
Planning
or-
department and stuff.
Yeah.
When I got here, I think coincidentally we talked about this with PSO today. I'm sorry, O&G. So when I got here, there were only, I believe, 15 people in engineering and construction. There are about 30 today. So we've literally doubled the size of the department. I'm watching capacity all the time. We've added a project manager to manage those projects to make sure the public knows what's going on. And so do I think where we can handle it now? Yes. Are we going to possibly need additional people when we the voters hypothetically they approve thinking positive $263 to $300 million? There could be a need for Ethan and Kenny to come and say, yes, we need a couple additional project managers. So, but where we are today, and I'll let Kenny follow up on that, but we basically doubled it in 8 years.
I completely agree. We're handling our capacity right now, and I think they're working very efficiently. Also, under Mr. Spurgeon's tenure, the level of expertise that we've brought into the organization has greatly increased. To your point, I would say in the near future, we probably need to look at right-of-way. We have one agent handling all of the city of Broken Arrow, so that may be something that we need to look at. But for this year, we're in good shape.
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, you look at it, you got Charlie, you got the folks that are handling water, wastewater, you have two here. I mean, we have what I would call a private sector version of a public sector operation in terms of quality and ability to get things done.
It's the best consulting firm in the Tulsa metropolitan area.
Where's Ethan? There he is over there. So hopefully that answers your question. I feel really good where we're at. And if we need some, I mean, the thing about his positions, they're high dollar positions. When you go to hire engineers, the other challenge is that we have to be careful that we don't lose them because other people see their talent, and obviously, you know, we got to balance that and make sure that our pay scale meets as best as we can to be able to keep them. So
I retract my last comment.
So STCI, we talked about this Tuesday night. Obviously, it's very, very important to the sales tax because it provides revenue. The estimated revenue is a little over $10 million. That has grown. It pays for the primary as it's listed in the book. The pay as go as your capital. And I really try to focus hard on dividing that up to where every department gets some of those funds, and make sure that that no one is guaranteed a certain amount of money every year. So they all come in and they have to justify it. There's only really a couple of expenditures that I look at automatically need to put in. I mean, police vehicles, we talked about that extensively Tuesday night. That's something I have to plug in every single year. There's a few others. There is some money that is built into STCI that we take off the top of that, and then the rest of it is based on allocation. I should say on priorities. Everyone has priorities. And it seems like every couple of years there's a theme. A few years ago, we saw roofs were a big thing. This year it's roofs and HVAC. And now that we have Ryan, we didn't have him before. When we look at the next bond package, I'm going to ask him, and he already knows this, to take an extensive look at all of our buildings and try to forecast what we might need. So when we because these are items that we can definitely bond out for 20 years, have him give me an estimate so we wouldn't have to use STCI except on an emergency basis. We could actually use general obligation bond money in Proposition 3 or 4, whatever that would be for city facilities, to where we could actually just take it from the bond funds rather than the pay-as-you-go, which would free up other monies that we could use for other departments that have those pay-as-you-go capital needs. So these are some of the highlights. There's always the highlights in every year.
Full list is on page 156.
What's the bike expansion? What is that for?
That is the downtown, isn't it the downtown community development, Joe?
This machine. It's this machine.
Are we doing that? Are we doing a second phase of that?
Well, that's something that we're committed to the first phase, and that's something that's going to be budgeted for, but we need to decide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we need a report of like how much it's utilized and,
Yeah. Do they ever leave?
And we are pulling that information.
okay. So we need lights out at the sand volleyball courts, so.
More than a
Just
bike
saying.
Then we,
expansion is what I
we do
hear.
have those now.
We do?
We have lights at the sand volleyball.
Oh,
Looky there.
ask
You
and
asked
shall
for it and you shall
receive.
receive.
Look at that, instantly.
That's so great.
The remounts, I mean, I think that was a great investment that we did with purchasing and then remounting, because the boxes, as they're called, are still in great shape. So I'm glad that council bought into that program. Obviously, dump trucks, I mean, skate park lighting, I mean, there's so many things, Battle Creek improvements. I mean, these are all just small little items that we need to expend to make sure that folks have what they need to be able to do their job every day. Okay.
Rocky.
All right, at this point, we're going to turn it over to Rocky if there are any questions, so Rocky can give his great update in regards to what's planned for the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor. As Mr. Spurgeon mentioned, before you tonight will be a proposed street maintenance program for fiscal year 2024. As a reminder, Street Sales Tax Fund 343 was a special revenue fund created for the purpose of improving, constructing, and maintaining our city streets, sidewalks, traffic signals, and materials, including the installation of traffic control devices and signalization. This fund came from a 0.25% tax that was effective January 1st, 2017. In the initial conception of this fund, it generated anywhere from $3 to $4 million. Currently today, and probably moving forward, it generates around $5 million a year. And here's how we propose how to use those funds. Next slide, please.
Next slide, there we go.
So here are the street signal projects we have identified. For your information, we own and operate and maintain 88 traffic signalized intersections, 2 pedestrian crossings, 1 at Bass Pro and on Florence, 3 school zone crossings at Liberty Roads, which is right off Kenosha and 4th Street, Wolf Creek and Oliver. We also, at the end of this month, the beginning of next month, we will have completed installing LED street name signs at all of our arterial intersections, with the exception of those that are under construction, will be under construction here in the near future.
They look so good, by the way.
They're nice.
They do.
We also maintain 56 civil defense sirens as well. So here are the, of the 88 traffic signalized intersections, we have approximately 52 intersections that have flashing yellow arrows. And in this budget proposed before you tonight.
Which I love, by the way. I love flashing yellow arrows.
They're nice. So we are proposing 3 more intersections to add flashing yellow arrows. So they are at Albany and Stone Ridge, Kenosha and Evans, and Kenosha and Oneida. So the next project there at Highway 51 and Houston Street is just to replace the traffic control cabinet and the video detection. Another project is to upgrade our terrace video card upgrades. This is for the video detection at the intersections of Houston and Elm, County Line in Houston, Olive in Houston as well. And then our last project there for traffic signals is to update the traffic signal heads on Main Street at Houston, Pittsburgh Place, Richmond, and Washington Street. So these signal heads, they're fading, and they're going to have the yellow reflective background on them as well. Next slide.
Before we go forward, Rocky, let me just bring up here. You know, I know the Streets for All committee's taking a look at a lot of different things. One of the things I wanted to ask council, because at first I thought it'd be a good idea to hold up in terms of painting the traffic signals, poles, but since the ones at New Orleans have been put up, how really, really good the ones that have painted look. Mm-hmm. I've asked Rocky to go ahead and finish the specification to at least get started in doing that. I know we got the committee looking at it. I don't want to jump the gun, but it does take time to actually get a contractor and then actually to do all the work and coordinate all the work. I'd like to get that started to try to get done. Is there anything they're discussing that is inconsistent with us doing that you're aware of?
No, it's a super fun committee to be on. I mean, but there's nothing that, I think the things that we're doing in New Orleans Square right now are very in line with what we're talking about in the committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've asked him to get that started. Where are we at on that, Rocky?
Yeah, I think that was one of the, I'm on that committee as well, so that was one of the things that we wanted to see was to upgrade the traffic signals to get rid of that old faded aluminum looking color. There is a package out for a bid right now. There's 5 intersections to be painted along Kenosha Street. And in the proposed budget for upcoming fiscal year 2024, there will be another 10 that have been identified to be painted as well.
So we're going to move on that because you'll have to approve a contract, I believe. So that'll be coming to you so we can actually get started. Thanks, Rocky.
You're welcome. So on to street projects. Back in 2016, the city hired a consultant to analyze our roadway network system to create a pavement management report, and we use this report to identify which streets will receive what type of rehabilitation or maintenance. We have 1,250 lane miles that we maintain. 75% of them are asphalt, 25% are concrete. It is an asset worth approximately $600 million. Currently, the score right now, the PCI score, Pavement Condition Index, is 70, which is right there on the border of good and very good. Council did award last year, at the beginning of the last fiscal year, to award a contract to IMS, which is the consultant that did our pavement management report back in 2016. We did have a meeting with them yesterday, and so they should be presenting their findings at the end of June, first meeting in July possibly with the new score. So for all intents and purposes, the projects I've identified are based on the 2016 report because we don't have all the data yet. So we identify projects anywhere from the 35 PCI range to the 75. Anything below 35 would require some type of reconstruction effort. Anything above 75 would require preventative maintenance. So here's a graph showing the importance of street maintenance. It is a cost-effective, systematic approach that extends the pavement life cycle. So we like to spend our dollars there at the top of the curve. If we let that curve or the pavement deteriorate to the bottom of the curve, obviously it's going to take more of an investment to bring that infrastructure up to a suitable life. Currently, right now, with ever-changing times, it costs approximately $1.4 million to reconstruct 1 lane mile. So it is important that we stay on top of street maintenance. So here on sheet 225 in your book, if you follow along, here are the concrete panel repair projects we've identified. One is East Houston Industrial Park. This is just south of Houston and east of Lynn Lane over there. The next addition is the Ridgeway Heights addition. This is out east by Midway Road, just north of Kenosha and east of Midway Road. The next project is Brenton Woods. I believe this is over off of Garnett and south of 71st Street in that area. And the last one is Steeplechase Farms, just north of 41st, east of County Line.
I don't see Melinda Park in there.
Well, Melinda Park is a 2018 general litigation bond package. The design's already ready to go. I think it's been bid out and awarded, but we have to upgrade all the water and the sewer line in there first before we go and then tear out the roads.
I'll be so excited.
Weekly,
I get calls.
You and
I
Nicole.
got it.
Nobody
I
loves
actually
us.
got a message today about
Really?
Melinda Park.
The road work is done, so I think they're just working on the water and the sewer line.
Good. That's good. I'll pass that on.
So it's gonna, Melinda Park, it'll be, I mean, it sounds like that's gonna be a mess for a little bit if we're
A lot of it.
redoing. It's gonna be a mess. So, I mean, we need to prepare them for a mess.
Yes, we'll-
Before it gets pretty, or new roads.
Yeah, we'll put out some type of information
Okay.
through the engineering department, because it's all gonna be contracted out, so they'll be well notified.
Well, and that'll be good too, just to, then they'll know what's coming anyway,
Yeah.
good, bad, or whatever. They'll
Right.
know that,
They're
hey,
getting
we
something.
haven't forgot about you.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, the next, other type of method we use is resurfacing streets. So a lot of this work, or most of this work, is done in-house with the exception of any milling work. So our crews do a lot of this work. There's only 4 projects identified for this fiscal year. However, 3 of the 4 are quite substantially large. The first one is Midway Road from Kenosha to Norma Street. So the Ridgeway Heights neighborhood that I mentioned earlier. Sorry, this is on sheet 224 of your book. So this resurfacing goes from Kenosha to Norma Street, which will tie into that Ridgeway Heights neighborhood as well. The next one is the Homestead Edition. So this is in the Rose District area, just north of Houston Street between Elm and Main, on the south, just north of Houston Street there. The next one is Hidden Springs. This is on the southeast corner of Elm and New Orleans. This will tie in or right there behind the Come and Go, that neighborhood right there. So this will kind of tie into the intersection work that's there as well. And then the last one is the Stone Mill addition up Olive Street.
Can we let Melinda Park know that they're getting worked on before we start on Stone Mill? That's my neighborhood. They're gonna think that I'm getting before theirs because I live there.
I've let Miss Peggy know several times that we're doing work, but
Me too.
unfortunately.
I know.
So, those are the resurfacing projects that we've identified, and then our typical miscellaneous work that we do throughout every year is street markings, refreshing the lane markings, annual street maintenance. This just varies from anywhere in the city where there's a need to do some base repair, our annual sidewalk maintenance, and then alley improvements. So when we have a chance or we have time, we're started the process of starting to pave some of those alleys that are in the Rose District.
Is it next week is when you're starting, or soon? You said.
For
the alleys in the Rose District. When's that going to start?
We fit it in our schedule. So we always had this $200,000 budgeted throughout every fiscal year. So when we have time to get to some of them, I think we've paid one for sure, if not two. But a lot of times we do put a lot of millings. We do a lot of grading of the alleys and millings. In fact, we did 3 this week already because of all the new homes that are coming in that require, because of the DROD, the Downtown Residential Overlay District, that require them to have alley access to their garages. So we accommodate the home builders in the meantime with asphalt milling.
Okay.
And so here are the projects we've identified for residential rehabilitation work. So this is money coming out of the 2018 general obligation bond package. One is a concrete panel replacement project in the Oak Tree Estates neighborhood. And the other one is a resurfacing curb and gutter, driveways, sidewalk in the College Edition. So this is basically everything east of Main Street between Dallas and Detroit in that area. So here's a breakdown. We're proposing, see there at the bottom, $5.7 million street maintenance program. 4% is tied to street signal projects, 43% is tied to concrete and resurfacing projects, and 10% is tied to the miscellaneous work I just mentioned. So one of the things I wanted to mention is in the 5 years, coincidentally, that I've been here, we've spent $18 million in street maintenance, utilizing the street sales tax fund. There is a current fund balance of a little over $7 million. So of that 7, you see we're right on pace. We're going to spend approximately $5.7 million of that $7 million. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, I will say I saw some of your group's handy tree work yesterday, and you all get after removing trees for sure.
They do.
Do a good job.
It's one of my favorite jobs.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot. They're like, they just started this morning, and I'm like, it looks like there's 4 miles of trees that are just gone. So good job. Is out where all the sewer lines are in history. Yeah.
Any questions for Rocky about just operations? Very, very responsive, his team is.
So along those lines, I'll just point on a quick stat. Like I said, there's 1,250 lane miles. So in the 5 years, we have maintained or brought whatever that PCI score is up to 100 for about 115 of those lane miles.
Good job.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. The Bama budget for this year as proposed is $43 million, $143 million. And it includes the expenditures, transfers out, ending fund balance, capital outlay, and the debt service. Last year, the budget was almost $135 million, and what is proposed is just under 7% higher than the previous year, just ending. The highlights, rate increases needed to pay for ongoing operations, planned capital improvements, and OWRB debt service. We talked about the rates Tuesday and showed those based on a customer of 6,000 and 12,000 gallons of water respectively. We're also looking at just over $5 million in what we call pay-as-you-go type capital projects. And the proposed additional OWRB projects is $19 million. Total OWRB projects in progress right now is just under $62 million, with the additional projects that we are proposing be added for FY 2024. Here's also the pie charts which are in the budget book. Just have a breakdown
the departmental, which is a summary sheet in there too in the BAMA section.
The expenses by classification. Here are some of the higher, probably more prominent pay-as-you-go capital projects. Forklift, trailer-mounted generators, 3 side loaders for solid waste and recycling department, dump truck, hydrovac trailer, front-end loader, RMUA capital, 2-ton crew cab, and an excavator. I'll let Kenny take it from here.
If you look in attachment D, you don't have to right now, we take out loans to do our water and our sewer. Clean water is actually your sanitary sewer program, and we have just about 10, no, that's correct, the first one, clean water is 10.1 million. And just quickly, a few of the projects, you'll see the third one down is Melinda Park. You can actually call this program this year the Melinda Park program, because we also have some for the drinking water. So the first project, real quick, is a design and construction on the RMUA Hakey Creek plant. We've talked about that routinely over the last year, and it's still processing through the design. The lift station, which is in Hakey Creek Park, that's a design, phase 4. Melinda Park, this is for the sanitary sewer that Rocky just talked about. So the streets are ready to go. We don't want to get in there and then have to tear it up for the sewer and the water. So we've got a little over $3 million. This is construction money, so that means we are really close to bidding. We're in the design process. I don't know if it's gone to DEQ yet or not. Not yet. So we still have to go to DEQ and get our permit, but we are getting close to that point, and this year we expect to go into construction. Camino Villa, sewer rehab. We get a lot of infiltration and inflow in that system. I'm sure it's an old clay tile that was built in the maybe late 50s, early 60s. This will help us immensely in the Adam Creek Basin by being able to replace the sanitary sewer and then reduce some of that I&I that gets into the system. This is also construction money. I don't remember when, but we had a contract maybe about a year ago, so it's kind of at the same point with Melinda Park. Innovation District construction. We have a lot of money already set aside, but we do expect that we will need some extra money to build out that lift station and the sanitary sewer, so we've actually put $2 million in for that. And that one, I do believe, has been sent to DEQ for review. Cambridge Lift Station, that's out there at Houston and Oneida Road. That's an old lift station that we have a lot of problems with. So money for design on that. So the clean water is 10.1 million. Safe drinking water. So that's the other part of the loan process. As you can see there, it's just totals just under 10 million, about 9.5. 3 or 4 main projects there. Melinda Parks, there's a water line here. So in total, we have over $6 million for Melinda Park water and sewer, along with what Rocky had for the streets ready to go. Bass Pro booster pump station, that's one right there that feeds First Baptist Church across from the hospital, 6.1 million. We have a lot of problems on our 5 million gallon tank on the north end of town. We have been working for several years to try to resolve the issues that we have. We lose our disinfection up there, so sometimes it has to be offline. We need to solve that problem. We've done a lift station that feeds the golf course, Battle Creek Golf Course. We've updated that, and now we want to put in a new booster pump that can help feed this station. So that's actually acquisition and construction money. I think the design is nearing completion. I don't know if it's gone to DEQ for approval yet, but it's nearing completion. And then lastly, the advanced meter infrastructure addition. This is really for acquisition, design, and construction. So this is citywide, the last one. Total of 19.6 million. And as Mr. Spurgeon said, we talked about this a little bit Tuesday night. Right now, we're looking at about $20 million a year in reinvesting into our infrastructure for water and sewer. And that was that discussion a little bit Tuesday.
Are we, like, so yesterday when I did my ride along, and it's not fiberglass, but it looks like the fiberglass, what's the name of that stuff that are we using that in all new projects or just certain projects?
Manholes?
Fiberglass pipe.
Oh, pipe? We are looking at it in several project locations, and when we can use it, and it is cost-effective and the best choice, we'll use it. Sometimes PVC is a better choice, but we are we're much more open to using it now. We're actually looking at some of the fiberglass manholes. I don't know if we're putting that in on the other, if that was concrete on county line or fiberglass. Concrete. We looked at both, but yes, we're open to whatever product is providing us the longest durability and most efficient.
It was pretty impressive. Like, I got to watch them put it together, pop it together, and just push it on through.
Very good.
Pretty cool.
Thank you, Kenny. We talked about the general obligation bond package Tuesday night. $74 million in current 2011, 14, and 18 general obligation bond projects. We mentioned, someone asked the question about 2014. There's about $7 million that's still left, and a lot of that work is encumbered in projects that are being done. So I think we've had a really good track record of getting those older projects off the books, because that's what the voters approved, and very happy with that. And then the sale we talked about Tuesday night for FY 2024 is $25 million. So one of the things that is in my, I want to make a note here. One of the things that's in my budget message was the fact that I put in the bond package proposal funds to hire an architect, and, as I had mentioned earlier this year, to hire an architect and possibly land acquisition for Fire Station number 8. Not construction, because the architectural work and all the work that's being done will take about a year. So that's in there. So that package that you saw is going to have to change, because that was part of that $25 million, and that was in my budget message. So Kenny's going to have to go back, and really it's about $500,000 that we're going to have to adjust. So once that's updated, I will get it to you all so you can take a look at it. I mean, there's going to have to be lots of discussions about 8, but I do know that we need to move forward with actually getting architectural plans and a location, albeit out there at the training center area or somewhere in that vicinity. Okay, so the work plan starts, I believe, on page 11 or 12, which really every year, my focus and the council members have just continued this in so many different ways, is communications and transparency. And really, I'd like to outline some of the highlights, mainly the economic development administration initiatives after communication transparency. And communication transparency does a lot for economic development. I tried to touch on, where we are with Aspen Ridge, which Monday we know where we're at on that, the Innovation District, the Rose District, New Orleans Square, and the continued work we're doing there, the Adams Creek Town Center, which we're currently working on, the PSO. Later this summer, council is going to see that policy that we're going to put in place, probably next month, if not in July. Also, we're hearing a lot of good things tentatively about the shops at Aspen Creek, and I feel pretty good about at ICSC later this month that Jennifer and Norm are going to be talking to the developer about some progress supposedly they have, so I'll be able to update the council, because we have a major capital investment in that area. If that's one thing that we hear about probably weekly, it's what's going on there. Mm-hmm. So obviously property had its time, it didn't happen. It looks like with everything the city has been doing in that area, it's prompted a lot of additional review of the potential return on investment that they can make by actually making those investments. So hopefully we can have an update sometime in June or so. Also, I mentioned in the plan, Wagner County. We're going to be talking a lot about Wagner County. Wagner County, the potential for having that planning commission, conversations with Rural Water 4, the bond package. I think there's going to be a lot of discussions about improvements in Wagner County. So because that's where the growth of our community is, and this council always likes to be proactive and be looking down the road. You're going to hear a lot more about Wagner County. I mean, obviously we're not going to. There's so much left to do in Tulsa County, but where the growth that we need to prepare for is going to be out in there. So there's a whole section that's about Wagner County.
Don't tell anyone in Ward 1 that there's anything that's going to happen.
Well, I was I highlighted the sentence that you said, according to the county engineer, about 80% of its residential building are in Broken Arrow. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, we met today with ONG, and they brought their economic development programmer, and he told us that they are anticipating in Broken Arrow over the next 20 years, 15 to 20,000 additional housing residential type units. And they have the data that they believe supports that type of growth, and so they're trying to do the same thing we're doing with water and sewer, which we'll talk about this year. Having the council get to see the long-range plans for water and sewer, is looking at gas and making sure. And that was the biggest discussion today with ONG, was what can we do to cut down on the time they need to review, and they made some suggestions, and then what we can do to actually help them. So there were some good discussions.
Because they understand how much they hold up our projects, right? When
that they understand. What they did do was they committed to make sure that we would always have adequate crews, but they need they wanted more advanced notification for us, so they can see our capital plans, for example. Then they can look and say Broken Arrow's got these plans coming, then they can actually hire the subcontractors, because that's how they do the work. Like I said, Kenny and I'll have a report for you next week on exactly the results of that. But I feel we had one 5 years ago, and we saw some progress, and our folks have a good relationship with them, and I feel really good about today how that went in terms of things that we need to do. Both sides can actually do better. So I was happy with it, so I'll update you. There was a lot of discussion about that. We talked about the citizen survey. We talked about the new city hall. I mean, I'm really excited about that initiative, and Kenny's actually going to start working on, if everything goes well tonight, we'll start putting the RFP together for architectural services. There's also a lot of quality of life projects that are in there. One thing that I'm very excited about, and Kenny has been riding herd on this for months now, is we are moving in the right direction to be added to the ODOT's eight-year plan. Now, that's something I don't want to broadcast to everybody yet, because I don't want to create an expectation, but I don't mind talking about it, because everything's moving in that direction. And then once that happens, then the project on Lynn Lane and Highway 51, it's just a matter of until they accumulate enough funds to do the project. So I wanted Kenny just to touch on that briefly, what you can share.
There's a lot of movement on that corridor and that discussion point. So the engineering groups had a contract with the consulting firm ODOT calls them feasibility plans, and we have had that plan laid out. We met with ODOT, I'm gonna say maybe November last year, somewhere around that. And ODOT came back and said, are you interested in a 7-lane road? And I'm like, yes. Forgot to tell you guys, I apologize. But that moved the needle quickly. So engineering group re-engaged our consultant to try to get a cost figure on that. That's what ODOT needs right now. And we are really close to having the cost and that information to ODOT. I know that we're talking about having a meeting later this month with some help from Representative Ford, as well as working with the district engineer and some of the other congressmen. So it's moving quickly. If we do this, which I think right now it's all positive, they need to have just basically a commitment letter from us that we're interested in doing this, and then our share is really probably 20%. And we already have $7 million for this corridor. Through your policy actions, we have applied for STP. We've already got a $3 million STP. We have our 4.1, 4.2 bond, less what we spent on the consultant, so there's 7. And it looks very, very promising.
So I know we're looking at doing an additional ramp, or a ramp on the west side.
That is correct.
Will we keep the ramp?
It's going to be ODOT decision.
Okay.
Our recommendation is to keep the ramp.
Right, okay.
So,
'cause I'm like, I would think it would just back it up the other way if we don't.
Typically, they don't want that, but they do have that in certain locations. And with our traffic, so Kenosha and Lynn Lane is our heaviest traveled intersection. I don't have the latest date on it, but I remember a few years ago, 2015, 2018, it was about 55,000 vehicles a day, so I'm sure it's over 60,000 now. That would really preclude or help us to keep both ramps.
Yeah.
So if you're headed northbound from Kenosha, I would anticipate you taking the cloverleaf that's there now. And then if you're headed southbound, you would take the right and get onto that west side. So I really believe it's a best case scenario, and we're actually looking with ODOT's recommendation, 7 lanes, which is actually what Kenosha is. If you go from Lynn Lane towards County Line, it's 7 lanes.
That's one of the most important things I've asked Kenny to work on this year, because we just can't fund that kind of project, and you're going to need federal and state help. And I think because of the great relationship we have, and also because Broken Arrow, I believe the state wants to provide funding to, the 4th largest city, in the state, 3rd during the summer when there's no students. And so I feel really good about this. That's
Or if
some.
you count zip codes instead of census data.
We would be larger.
Yes.
Well, overall, that's one of our biggest complaints that we
Yes.
get, especially through this election cycle.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I told them, well, we just can't really discuss it, but, I go into about the total amount, you know what I mean, that we were looking at. But I always emphasize that there's other entities involved besides us, but we are working on actually on the drawings of it right now. So it'll be exciting to see that.
So that just throughout the entire document, I'd like to list everything we're working on. I'm also excited about the maintenance facility renovation projects we're going to be doing in a couple of different buildings. I mean, we're literally running out of space, not only at City Hall, and as I mentioned to you a couple of months ago, I think it's important that we can try to get that work done before we do anything on City Hall, because that's where our folks are working today. And so that's something that I've asked Kenny to focus on extensively to get those improvements. And there'll probably be a need for additional improvements in the next bond package to make sure that we have adequate space for all of our employees. So, next slide, Cindy. Okay, so I asked Kenny and Norm to pick one member of their team to come and give the presentation, and so these are the two folks that we asked to come speak to the council members. And so I'll turn it over to Norm and Kenny, and they can introduce their folks and then take it from there.
When I came over to this position, one of the first people I talked to was Scott Carr, and I asked him what keeps him awake at night, and the first thing he talked about was cybersecurity and ransomware. If you've just seen the city of Dallas is going through this. Through your approval, a tremendous amount of money, funding, and effort has been put in by Scott's team to bring us up to a very high level, much safer level. I think he actually sleeps a few hours now. But I'm very proud of the work that Scott and his team do. We're in a much better place today than we were 3 years ago.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. Scott Carr, Director of IT. I haven't had the honor of meeting with all of you to speak about the Information Technology Department, so it's my great pleasure to highlight our budget proposal for this year. This slide, actually if you could back up, this slide here gives you a little bit of illustration of the ground that we cover. A lot of times IT is thought of as the desktop and just what's on the desktop, but in reality we cover the entire city and its facilities, even as far out as the water plant. A lot of that is computers and servers, network closets, building maintenance, wiring. As we have new buildings, as we rework buildings, IT needs to be in there before anything else happens, before walls go up. Otherwise, typically we're ripping open walls to get cabling and wiring in. We maintain everything from our cellular modems at our new traffic signals to our radio network for fire and police to our microwave network, which is how our water plant stays online. Next slide. This is our team. On the far left is our IT communications group. They do that radio network, microwave network, a lot of our facility work, including door access and the technology that goes in there. We have our help desk, which is oftentimes the face of the IT department. Dave, Kyle, and James are typically the people that are our IT first responders when there is an issue, whether that is on the desktop or with a police or a fire vehicle. Our network systems group oftentimes is behind the scenes. We have just one network engineer, Matt Kays. We have 2 cybersecurity engineers, John and Shay, and they keep us safe when I'm probably taking those few hours of sleep at night. Just as an example of that, we just this week had an alert go off that some unknown software was being installed on a PC that we were quickly able to isolate, take off our network, physically grabbed it, because that is the actual footprint for a ransomware attack. Something unknown is happening. And a ransomware attack, like a lot of other attacks, are oftentimes triggered by what is called a zero-day attack. A zero-day means we don't know anything about it. You might feel safe running a virus checker on your computer, but a virus checker only knows about the things that have already happened. So within that scan of your computer or your system is the knowledge of all the viruses that came before. And a zero-day attack is when something unknown happens. So we executed our playbook on this particular item. It did not turn out to be malicious. It was adware, which we do not want because we don't want anything scanning our systems and our network. So we removed that particular item. But that was our cybersecurity engineers at work. We also have Rodney Mitchell's our systems engineer. He actually brings experience in his previous lifetimes as a software engineer. He is supporting our new enterprise resource planning or ERP systems that we recently rolled out. As new systems that the city uses across the board, those technologies are different than our legacy systems. We have to support them and work with them in very different ways. And there's been many times where perhaps you've had a question or heard about something with our new ERP systems going in place. A lot of that has been in how they interface with other systems. Bringing Rodney on board last year has allowed us to make sure that those systems tie together. In many cases, we have employees that are exporting from one system and importing to another. It's an interface, but it's a manual human interface. In the coming years, we hope to take that and automate that so it's not just a human being pushing a button. Dustin Weber is dedicated actually for police and fire, and having somebody embedded within the public safety area has been very beneficial, not just for dispatch, but for our police and our firefighters. We have a SCADA engineer that was approved last fiscal year, and that person is actually starting this month. Our SCADA engineer allows us to have somebody in-house to take care of probably the most important technology a city can have, and that is our water and wastewater systems. We were previously dependent wholly on contractors, but more importantly, wholly on their time. If they didn't have time for us, they did not respond to us, and the times that we needed response were the times that were emergency situations. So we're really excited as far as having our own SCADA engineer in-house. And then on that far right, you see our GIS division. We just have a new manager there, Heather Leader, and she brings in a lot of great skill sets. The GIS system, like a lot of what we've experienced in IT in the past 4 years, has seen a lot of growth. 4 years ago, that GIS division, a lot of what they were doing was making sure that maps could be printed. That's not entirely true. There was stuff that was going in to our system itself, but the GIS system now is the beating heart of a lot of our brand new systems. So we learned a lot. When we put in our new public safety system, we discovered that our data, the actual GIS data that we have, was quite dirty, quite messed up. And we had to spend months upon months of cleansing that data. Now it's to a place where our brand new modern day system with the smarts and the know-how can read our maps, read our map data, and know where the closest unit is to move a fire truck to respond to an incident, or police officers to respond to an incident. But with data that was not clean, that wasn't possible. An example of unclean data, we had roads in our GIS system that before we didn't even have this data layer in place, but we had roads with 0 miles per hour. That's the default. They didn't have a miles per hour associated with the road, didn't need one before. But with 0 miles per hour, a fire truck doesn't move. So they were having to be routed in a variety of different ways around the places where the data wasn't clean. Today we have our clean data powering that public safety system, but it's also true on other city systems. If the GIS system goes down, a lot of the beating heart of our new modern day systems goes down. So we're in a very different place. 4 years ago, we had one reality. Today we have another reality. And not all of the GIS information that is a problem is dirty data. And I say dirty data. In reality, we have Tulsa County, we have Wagner County, we get data from both, we get data from INCOG, all that has to be merged in. They don't all do it the same way. That's dirty data. Missing data is dirty data.
So is this still a work in progress? When I did my ride-along with the fire department, where they were sending the ladder truck was a couple of miles further south than where we needed to be. Paul's point was more accurate. It like got us right. Like I pulled up the app and I'm like, this is where the fire is. So is that still a work in progress? We're still...
Technology as a whole is a work in progress. If we don't fund it, it stops working. And I'm going to talk about that in my later slides, actually.
Yeah,
but yes, GIS data, we're pulling in new data on a daily, weekly basis.
I just didn't know if we were
So-
still like updating it and refreshing it, and it was just going to
We're
take
in a place
while.
where that's very clean right now, where public safety is concerned. That doesn't mean there's not other technology issues surrounding some of those elements, because there are.
Can we go to the slide before this one?
Yes.
Now the clicker's not working, James.
It's dirty data.
Dirty data. That's so funny, it's worked all the way to IT.
So I'm assuming this is south, right? Where that one lone red dot?
That's the water plant, that's actually east.
Okay.
Deborah's house.
Deborah's house.
Yes.
Because are we like in South Broken Arrow? I thought we were having some
We
radio
are.
issues in South Broken Arrow. Is that being worked on?
Yes.
So we have, when we say radio issues, in reality, we're talking typically when it's dispatch routing units and using our system. It can be one of three things. The GIS data is just one aspect of it. The GPS actual chip that's in the device is another aspect. Our devices typically are laptops, whether that's in a patrol car or in a fire engine. If that laptop isn't being properly maintained, if the team isn't rebooting it regularly, it may not be fully functional on a given day. In some cases, like with what we did initially with fire, is we replaced all the laptops. That's done. Those are workable. They do have to have regular, I'll say, maintenance, but that rebooting is kind of important. And we know that on the police side, we have old laptops in patrol cars that need to be replaced. Once we have that, then we have all the technology that our modern system then can use. But none of those are modern system problems. Those are expectations and assumptions of a modern system that we are providing for.
So when I did my set along with dispatch, we had 11 officers that were working, but only one of the 11 we could see where their coordinate, where they were.
Yes.
Like if they were to hit the emergency button,
Yep.
we would only know where one out of the 11 is. Is that because they're laptops?
That
or?
is actually because of laptops. We have, and it's not that ratio sounds like 90% of the laptops
Well, and that was just
are
the time
old.
that I said in
That's
a little
right.
5-hour period.
And
so.
we don't have that. We do have about 20% of laptops that need to be replaced in patrol cars, and we know that. We're going to be utilizing our regular budget to pull that out and replace those. However, on the police side, what's nice is within dispatch, the typical operating process is dispatch knows where they're at, even if they don't have a blinking light on the board. It's because they radio in when they're at a location, when they're leaving a location. And so it's not been as high a priority as like fire, so we took care of fire first. But police is the next thing on our radar to take care of.
Okay. I guess, so are you saying like in South Broken Arrow, it's not necessarily that we need more towers? Is it more, we need better newer equipment, or?
I do want to address the tower thing, because we do have some dead spots when you're talking about cellular data around the city limits of Broken Arrow. So there is dead spots. That is a connectivity issue, if you will, a network issue. When you drive into a place, just like if you have no bars on your phone, you have no bars on that computer's internal phone, and so there might be a loss of connectivity. There would be a loss of connectivity. That is because of, we utilize AT&T and FirstNet. That is because of where towers are located and obstacles. Trees, buildings, the other types of things that can interfere with GPS signal, or I'm sorry, cellular signals, will be a factor in that as well. So we just listed off 3 issues of assumptions that our new modern system says has to be there, and we have challenges with them. And we can overcome almost all of those challenges. But in terms of the lease towers for AT&T specifically, I mean, we do not have the city as well covered as we probably need to.
Well, I just thought more like for
concerned.
police and fire and our employees getting out on the radio. I'm sorry if they can't get out on their cell phone like the citizens or anything, but I mean, like when they're, I thought we were having problems in South Broken Arrow with our police and fire being able to get out on the radio.
On the radio, we don't have that issue. We have other issues which I can go into, but I don't want to take up all of our time tonight. And by the way, I love talking about this because there are very specific aspects of this that if you understand, a lot of things become clear. But let me just say that as we're working through a lot of these issues, I do understand exactly where it is. And our playbook in terms of how we replace equipment and who gets equipment replaced is prioritized so that the public safety needs are met first.
Okay.
But does that mean that if the section of town has trouble with their phones or AT&T and always have, is that the same type of problems that we're having with the same, the lack of?
One single aspect, yes, but not the entirety of it, no. We do rely on cellular modems that utilize AT&T, and so when there is no cell signals in certain parts of town, if our police and our fire that are utilizing equipment with cellular data equipment in it, they will also drop, yes.
And they usually know what area of town that is in, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
South Broken Arrow.
Okay, so that was the GIS division. I also want to highlight, we have Kimber Pittman, who you probably see quite a bit because she's the project manager that takes care of our forward-facing meetings such as City Council. Next slide. In our capital budget, which in your books I think is page 156, I'm just highlighting the key items. It totals $393,260. That's about $200,000 less than last year. We do have some carryover projects that we're pulling forward. A lot of these you'll see a cycle. We have a 4-year cycle or we have a 5-year cycle. The reason we're doing that is technology needs to be replaced. And it causes cost for the city when we're trying to maintain old equipment. It becomes 3 to 4 times more expensive to maintain old computers, as an example, as it does a brand new computer. So typically we want to clear that as as fast as we can. Now, normally I would probably recommend a 3-year cycle or a 4-year cycle. I have a 5-year cycle for servers, a 4-year cycle for computers, but that's what we can bear. So we are replacing that. You'll see that. You've seen that every fiscal year, about those same numbers. And that's just us replacing equipment before we have problems with it or before we have cybersecurity issues with old equipment. The jail video storage and server replacement project's a big important one. That needs a full upgrade, so that's storage and the server that drives it. Tiger Hill is one of our most important technological assets for the city of Broken Arrow. If anything would ever happen to Tiger Hill, we would be in a world of hurt. So we have better access going in. That's where the upgrade.
We don't want the whole world to know. Tiger Hill's a good one.
Lion Hill, it's completely separate.
That's true. We're putting machine guns in there, with laser tracking, we got a missile launcher.
Big tigers up there.
Real tigers.
Actual tigers.
Okay.
Our city cameras, we have that on a 4-year cycle. The one project that's a little different this year, vehicle-based radio repeaters. That's specifically for helping with various disaster recovery. Allows us to move our radio network as if those were towers around the city. Next slide. Our expense budget's pretty much the same. I just picked a few items that are big. Obviously, our training and continued certification for our staff. But professional services, IT doesn't necessarily keep a knowledge base of everything that the city needs to have done. When we don't have the knowledge in-house, our professional services budget is how we get that knowledge on a temporary basis, complete a project, and be able to move things forward. Our maintenance services budget item is large, and it's going to continue to grow. And the reason why is a lot of what we've recently added from a capital perspective, our new systems, they need to be maintained. So the licensing costs all fall into that category. As we go into this next fiscal, within this budget line is a lot of the maintenance and licensing agreements that take us forward. Cybersecurity will start falling into this maintenance services line. And in fact, if you go to the next slide, I just kind of break that out. That's not a complete list, but this is all of our technology that we utilize. Many of this is utilized by the departments represented here, and these costs are broken out and come out of their budget areas as well, where they're paying for parts of this technology. But a good chunk of it is centralized within the IT budget. And that is my last slide. I'll take any questions you might have.
I don't think people really realize that IT touches so much in our city. And I am glad that you upped our cybersecurity. I know when I did my onboarding, I think you were in the process of doing that then. And
yes.
I felt really comfortable with that for sure. So, yeah.
I think Tulsa had just had their little attack, so.
And Broken Arrow schools, it was not too long.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Great job, Scott.
Okay, so little over 2.5 years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago, Mr. Spurgeon saw an opportunity inside the organization to separate the general services department and break it into 2 departments, which would allow us to become really more mature as an organization, provide better service, and become more professional. He presented that to the governing body. They agreed, and we separated the general services into solid waste and recycling, hired Jerry. He came in and focused completely on that side. The remaining part of that was building maintenance and fleet maintenance, and that allowed us an opportunity to get Ryan Bays from Rogers County, and he's come in with an incredible amount of professionalism, customer service base, knowledge, and has elevated our game on that side as well. You see he's got one other thing up there, asset management. That is something that we're leaning towards, moving in that direction and setting ourselves up. So Ryan, his customer is everybody in this room. His customer is the city. and he's fantastic at what he does, and I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Mayor, Council, City Manager, Mr. Spurgeon, and Kenny, can't thank you enough for those kind words. Excited to get to visit with you a little bit about it. Kenny already took you through the first piece of it. Kind of the flow chart here, I'll try to go quickly through this one. But Tracy Sanchez, she's my administrative assistant. She does an excellent job. I love her. In fact, she helps all over the city, not just with me, but she is bilingual, and we utilize her services all through, and she is so happy to help. And just couldn't be happier to have that support. Roger Edwards is over on my building maintenance side, or our building maintenance side. He leads a team of 2 supervisors, a coordinator, and then we have 7 maintenance technicians, and then 2 on our cleaning side, so our janitorial side. The 7 that we have there are broken up into 3 teams. One of the odd man out goes and typically on remodel projects. So on a remodel projects, typically we would have 3 there. But they are covering 155 buildings through the city. You know, roughly, let's say 30 of those are large facilities, 30 of those are lift stations, and 30 of them would break up across parks and everything else through the city. So they've got a big responsibility. They put a lot of miles on their truck every year just trying to take care of everything. And another big piece of that is user groups. We spend a lot of time taking care of our user groups. We definitely aim for getting to yes there. So city managers instilled that in us, and we do aim for that. The asset manager or asset coordinator, we've created this position. It's currently open, but we'll get
It's
to.
got to be someone named Roger, obviously.
So I know. I've got to find
That's
one more
something Barry
Roger.
would say. It's gotta be-
Yeah, definitely need another one. So we'd looked at that position. That one will answer direct to me. Eventually, we would like to develop a manager in there, but we're looking to try to start with a coordinator. And we'll go into that in just a second. And then we have Roger Stubbs, who's in our fleet management position. Under there, we have a service writer and 2 supervisors. You break it down, and we have 13 mechanics. Of those mechanics, 4 of those work on our heavy trucks, and 1 of them works on our fire trucks. So those are our really technical side of it. Take some special certifications to work on fire trucks. And I'm going to come back to this in just a little bit because I'm excited to tell you some more about that. But those guys work really hard. 3 of them do our preventative maintenance. We'll go into the fleet, but I almost want to get ahead of myself. I get excited talking about the staff here. We can go on. So asset management is whenever you ask, well, Ryan, what's the asset management department going to do? The asset management department is really responsible for doing continuing development and implementing asset management principles, policies, and strategies across the city. So the asset works with all those internal departments we were talking about. So they're worried about 2 different things. They're worried about fixed assets, buildings, streets, water lines, everything that you could think that does it, and then also what we'd call like rolling assets. They're worried about the vehicles. Even we could bring Jerry into this. Even his carts would be considered rolling assets. So, you know, it isn't that they're going to be managing those assets. That's not the intent of it. The intent of it is that they can start doing some planning for us. They can help the city out, and I think Mr. Spurgeon did a great job of throwing me a softball on that earlier, leading into they are going to be implementing those strategies to optimize the performance of the asset, whether it's a rolling, whether it's a fixed, and minimizing the overall cost to manage that. Just like Rocky was talking earlier about, you know, knowing your streets, we need to know our assets here that the city has so that we can develop those strategies to taking good care of those and getting all the life that we can out of them. And then
I really love that we're doing this because I think so many things can be prevented, and if you get on it at the front end, it's going to save you a lot of money than if you wait for it to.
This is really a critical aspect,
Yeah.
thank you, Counselor, to getting to preventative maintenance.
You're going to see some more of this. I mean, I've had to balance over the last 8 years. Community development, I mean, my focus really was engineering construction because obviously there were projects that needed to be done, and then IT's added some people, and since Scott's been here, and then the separation, Jerry, I mean, it's. I wish I could fund them all right away, but I can tell you, we are going to be focusing heavily on this. So.
Very excited about where, you know, that'll be. I mentioned earlier, I've been here 2 years, so in 2 years, we have really seen some significant changes. You know, that's thanks to our city management staff and to the councils. Thank you very much for that. Building maintenance. So building maintenance, we talked about the number of buildings they're responsible for. We found a couple of fun projects here. Rerunning some water lines. We put in over 750 foot of water lines at one of our buildings recently.
And then, of course, there's other projects that building maintenance is responsible for, such as we built some sleds. They're the ones that work on your floats.
Floats, yeah, they're really good.
They're in the user groups, but not only that, but we also have the custodial service. A lot of that we contract out, we put that into service, but they really play an increment part of keeping the city operational. In the future, they'll be moving. They're over at the public safety complex currently. I anticipate in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years, they'll be relocating. So it'll be part of that master plan that you looked at recently. And they'll be very appreciative of that. So fleet maintenance is really grown. So even since I've been here, we've added about 200 more additional pieces to our fleet. We're up to 1,800 pieces of equipment. This would involve fire trucks, police, ambulances, dump trucks, excavators. This is everything, all the way down to lawnmowers. And it takes a lot of experience for our mechanics to do that. Something I was thinking about today that I wanted to share with you is that out of these 1,800 different pieces of equipment, they need to go through our lube area twice a year. So it's 3,600 times a year that our lube technicians, which we have 3 in that department, run through our vehicles in the city to make sure that we're taking proper measures, because we all know that we're having issues with finding parts, we're having issues with even finding vehicles, and then when we do find them, the cost we've seen significantly increase over the few years. So keeping up with our maintenance is just critical in fleet. And they also do a great job of, we take care of most everything we can in-house. We are faster at turning a repair around. So if it's a fire truck coming in, we actually have a mobile unit that'll go to the fire station. If it's something we can fix, that's new and exciting. We've been doing that for about a year with great success. We have 2 people that are dedicated really to police. So if police have something, we're getting it turned around quickly. We've looked at our boards. We have an action board that we keep up with. It has really decreased our backlog in the past year, which is substantial considering how long it's taking us to get parts. So the things that are happening in fleet, if we backed up from a year and a half ago to today, it's really a different world. I tell them when I go out there, I'm just so proud. It just is this well-oiled machine, and it's no credit to me. It's really credit to our leadership here. Next slide. So talking about fleet, if you've been in the building recently, and I know many of you had, it is full. And so we are busting at the seams to get all those pieces of equipment in the existing building we're in. We've grown as a city, and the building hasn't grown with it. We've increased the number of mechanics, the number of equipment, but we haven't increased the size of that facility. So back up in time, you were gracious enough to approve us looking at building a fleet facility, or a tire and lube shop, which we're very excited. It just went out for bids today. So engineering's been working very diligently on this to make sure it fits the needs, the design, and have everything put together for that. This is really critical for the city, because we're able to take our lube guys, our lube team, and our tire team, take them out of the building where we're doing the mechanic work and move them into their own dedicated facility that's really designed for them. That's really designed to help us get those 3,600 vehicles and equipment moved through. It also frees up some areas in the shop that we were looking for to dedicate to fire and ambulance, so that our 2 technicians that can work on those 2 mechanics have an area that's there set up, and they can bring them in and it fits the equipment. So something really exciting there. All the efforts are being made for this new shop, but I would like to thank council and city management for implementing plans to utilize our space and resources to their full extent. Not just with this, but with that master plan that you just recently approved. We appreciate that for them. So operating budget for fleet maintenance, they're about $2.2 million, and then the capital that we look at there, and that would be lifts, scanners, all that is about a little over 300, just under 380,000. So capital, back up one. So our kind of the big ticket items that we're looking at, we alluded to this earlier. Here's the roof projects that we're excited to hopefully be able to start this next year, to the tune of just under $720,000. We love roofs. Engineering is probably thinking, Ryan, please, I'm just wanting, but You know, they're doing great. We're not slowing down on them. We're getting our buildings in tip-top shape with roofs. We don't want any leaks. And then HVAC replacements, this is also something that is just ongoing. When you have the number of buildings that we have here in the city, we're going to be constantly looking at roofs. We're going to be constantly looking at HVAC. So the animal shelter, that's a big one. We have some funds there. The equipment on that one is kind of special. And any type of animal shelter where we have animals, the equipment only lasts about 10 years. It's corrosive to them, just put it that way. So anyway, we're working on that one. Pretty excited about that animal shelter and getting it back up. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk more
What
about.
are we spending $700,000 on at the History Museum?
So the History Museum, last year you approved 350.
Or the Broken Arrow
This is
Museum?
this is the Historical Museum. So we've had trouble with the air conditioning going back for probably 10, 15 years. So there's been complaints on that system. We have trouble controlling humidity for them. And so with having their items in there, they really need the humidity dialed into a set point. The way it was initially set up, back then we weren't really thinking about controlling humidity. We weren't thinking about zoning it. So what we had to do was an engineer put this proposal together for us. Engineering was involved, and we came back and we looked at funding it. So this is to complete the funding for that project. We're going to be going in. It's going to include new rooftop units, some zone control, and ways to control humidity for them.
Okay.
It will be a little disruptive to their world, but I'm very excited for the end result of it.
Councilman Parks, I know you're on that committee. You've talked a lot about that, haven't you?
We have, and I have a couple of comments to make. I haven't said a whole lot. I just kind of wait till we get about through, see if I have energy left. But I'll have to tell you this. For one thing, I was going to say, mention Ryan and how much he does for the community. We've all heard him. I could hear them shaking their heads up here that he does, because anytime you're involved with any of the nonprofits and they have problems, you know what I mean. We go to Michaela goes to Ryan, and Ryan comes out and takes care of it. Just that's the way it is. And he has done a great job. And we even moved to the Playhouse.
Yes.
Had a tremendous amount of problem. And they called me and asked me if I would look at their problem. And because they're at the center, and I'm old, senior center's right there. So they called me, and they were actually flushing the stools during a performance with a pitcher.
Yes.
And putting a pitcher in the stool. Now, I told them that I couldn't really direct city staff, and that's against the law, you know that. We can't direct staff. I said, but I can call the health department. But do I want to call the health department on my own city? So I said, let's get a hold of Ryan. So Ryan came out, and they called me back from the Playhouse within 3 or 4 days, and they had taken care of the complete problem. They had the water pressure they needed, new lines. They even replaced the stools in the old building. And they said, when you run for election? I said, I just got finished. But anyway, Ryan does a great job. But I want to expand on that a little bit. I know the city attorney's in here. You know, I just finished the election. It was real questionable whether I was going to run or not because I've done it so many times. And you think, one of these times you're going to get beat. And we prayed about it, my wife and I did. But one of the things, and I know nobody in here campaigned for me. Well, none of the staff campaigned for me.
I was going to say, what?
None of the staff campaigned for me, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
No one campaigned for me. But you actually did. You guys do such a great job in the city. Not one time did I run into an issue during that whole campaign that had anything to do with city or city staff not doing a good job. Everybody loved the city. Now, there's people voted against me, and I know that, or voted for the firefighters. You know, I know that. But I'm just telling you, in your own roundabout way, you doing a good job got me elected. And, of course, there are some that did campaign for me. But I just want you to know I appreciate it. I appreciate everything that you guys do. You made it easy for me to win election again for the 7th time. So I thank you very much.
Well, I can tell you, I can't tell how many times I talked about trying to make sure we do our job each and every day, so nothing that we do operationally has anything to do with the outcome of what may happen And that just reinforces the hard work of everybody in this room. So thank you for those comments. Well, you know, I can tell you, if I would have put Matt up there, if I would have put up Ethan, or I would have put up Jerry, they would have gave just a great presentation, and they'll get their shot next year, I assure you. But if there are any questions of Scott, we were fortunate to get Scott right before the COVID hit, and I really don't know what we would have done if we hadn't had him. He was just absolutely amazing, and Ryan came shortly after that, and so we're very fortunate. So
I didn't even know he was a DJ, so.
Oh, my goodness.
No one's as excited as Ryan, so that's.
He's like that every day.
That's right.
That's right.
So to wrap things up is that on June 5th, the public hearing, so the council will have to listen to a part of my presentation again. Sorry, not sorry. That's the law. And then if everything goes well, on the 19th of June will be the adoption. There's so much that's gone into putting this budget together. I mean, every one of these department directors fights very hard, in my opinion, for their departments. I can tell you that. We have a lot of discussions, very respectful. None of them wants to give up anything, but they also understand that, you know, we have to stay within budgets, and they do a great job of prioritizing their request. I rarely have to remind them to put them in that type of order, because they come in and I've got to have this, everything else if we can afford it. So it makes it a lot easier. And then Cindy and Tom and their team do a great job of putting everything together. And then actually Kenny works very hard with where's Jerry at? With Jerry and the other Jerry, Chuck Bosch, I should say. Where's Chuck at? Chuck, I missed him. That is very complicated. With the water and sewer, you're talking about rates, users, the amount of capital that we need to manage the utility. And so I could go all around the table and just compliment everyone for the job they're doing, because it's all year long, but the process starts in December and it runs all the way until this meeting this evening. And then finance and I will take it from there to finalize everything. And then communications will get it off, and then we'll actually put it out and start our publications and letting know everybody exactly what council has approved. So obviously you've had a week or so to look at the book. If there's other things you have questions on, let me know. Let Lori Hill know, and then we will get you answers to those and get them out to everybody. And I'll ask Cindy if there's anything else, or Norm or Kenny, before I turn it back to the mayor.
No, I just appreciate all the departments' help, and I think this year we did a little bit different. We did the budget week, and I think that really worked out well.
It worked out very well.
Well, and I'll tell you, and from all the years and the city managers, and I say this every year, our city manager really does a great job in presenting this so that we all really understand it. It all falls together. So again, thank you for that,
Been through
Michael.
7 of them. Or
Seven
seven,
of
wait, no.
7 times 4.
27.
Yeah.
Well,
Kevin.
approaching it, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't like to brag too much, but I gotta say something, you know. He does do a great job.
Thank you, sir.
If I may, I'd like to say one thing. I learned something new every year when we go through this. I've been through 13 of them. Tonight, on slide 15, when they showed the pie chart where your money goes, to your governance and to Mr. Spurgeon's administration, $200 million of that 354 is a reinvestment into our organization and our city. 200 million, capital outlay, debt service. That's a reinvestment into this community. That blew me away. So.
Norm, anything? Trevor, we good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, turn it back to you, Mayor.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call.
They both did. Tiff was approved at the planning.
Wimpy?
Was it? Yes. So I put it on the agenda tomorrow.
Okay. That's for Jennifer.
Gillespie?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Parks?
Yes.
Frank,
Oh, she hasn't even got it.
who am I missing? Lisa Ford?
Yes.
Thank you.